Welcome to Corium Concepts. Thanks for stopping by the channel today. Hopefully I can provide you some value, and in return you can leave me a like, a comment, good, bad, or otherwise. And if it's your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. And if you haven't already, turn those notifications on. I'm going to be practicing playing around with a live stream again this weekend to try and get that figured out proper. So if you want to try and catch that and have a couple chuckles, make sure your notifications turned on. Going to be a bit of a longer one today. I encourage, if you don't like the longer versions, just make sure at some point you come back and check out the latter part of the video. I think it's provides some value there, and I'm going to be breaking that down more on the live stream, where we can dive into some of these ideas a little deeper. So for now, let's just get into the markets. Corium's trading at 28.29, up 3% on the day. So taking a look at it on the daily chart, coming up on the underside of that overhead resistance from the moving averages. Sologenic trading just under that 15-cent mark, under a little bit of pressure the last day. And XRP also a bit sideways, trading at just under 52 cents. And Bitcoin up a little bit here in the last day, up 9% in the last week, currently sitting at 30,412. The MMRI sitting at 222, up very slightly, but in general sideways the last couple of weeks. Over on MintScan by Cosmos Station, the chain value of the assets on it, currently that's just Corium, obviously, 141 million. So it'll be nice to keep our eye on this as the value in the chain grows and the ecosystem grows, to see what all gets added here as we move forward. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this all grow. Currently we've got 32 to 38 validators, 149,555,000 tokens are locked up. Block time still 1.82 seconds. The validators by lowest fees, currently the top is 007 Corium, still holding that 0.5%. BitTrue coming in at 1%. Synchrotron coming in at 2.5%. Corium Services at 4%. Solo Nation 4%. And Core Heroes 4.5%. So all our community validators are giving as much as they can back to the community by keeping these fees low. So I'd just like to give a shout out to them. It's nice to see all the community ones at the top on that breakdown. And as far as voting power, Cosmos Station currently at 18,322,000, Zen Lounge 17,249,000, and BitTrue coming in third place there at 16,598,000. So in the regulation dramas today, Hester Pierce says the commission is holding an open meeting on Friday to consider reopening the comment period on the proposal to amend the definition of an exchange. So John Deaton posted Jay Clayton sitting somewhere saying to himself, "And they thought I was bad." That's referencing the U.S. SEC sees DeFi platforms as an exchange. And she kept going on that, in addition to ironing this t-shirt, which republishes code from a comment letter. "Will I need to register as an exchange before wearing it? It depends, per the SEC's latest release." So in checking out that release, there was this is definitely worth checking into further. What I wanted to address here, I shouldn't have moved it. Might have lost it there. Yeah, the Exchange Act and our rules define an exchange to be an organization, association, a group of persons that, among other things, provides a marketplace for the trading of securities. In this release, the Commission struggles to articulate what group means in the context of decentralized trading venue, where the venue is a piece of software and the participants do not necessarily know other participants. The release repeatedly suggests that persons may form a group if they're acting in concert with each other, and further explains that one indication of acting in concert with each other may be the presence of formal and informal agreement among these persons. But the release also explains that this is just one factor to consider, which suggests that no agreement, formal or informal, can even a concerted action is required. In fact, the release goes on to say that if the activities of any combination of actors constitute, maintain, or provide together a marketplace or facilities for bringing together buyers and sellers for securities, they may already be considered a group for purposes of exchange definition. This group, the release suggests, could designate a member to register the group from an organization to register as an exchange or become an ATS. But each member of the group would be collectively responsible for ensuring that the designated member of the group fulfills its regulatory responsibilities. The definition of the group is so expansive as to drain the word of any meeting and therefore any limitation of its scope. The release hints that the relevant group may include anybody who has even purely ministerial role with respect to DeFi activity. For example, the economic analysis notes that validators and miners may choose to discontinue processing DeFi transactions or cease processing transactions of a blockchain altogether to avoid the costs of the rule, which strongly implies that they could be liable for doing what they do for all sorts of transactions on the blockchain. The release suggestions that validators and miners could form a single entity and register with the commission carries a similar implication. One request for comment lends further credence to this interpretation, stating that a group of persons under the rule could include, for example, the providers of the DeFi application or user interface, developers of AMMs or other DLT code, DAO validators or miners, and issuers or holders of governance or other tokens. The release does not even provide comfort to persons trading tokens using peer-to-peer protocols, as they will not be liable as a member of a group constituting an exchange. The Commission's approach here, as if back in the 1990s the Commission had insisted that internet service providers and the developers of internet protocols would be collectively responsible for ensuring that the electronic communication network complied with federal securities laws merely because the ECN could not operate without those services. The release's ambiguity undermines fundamental First Amendment protections. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I'd like to dive into it a little bit more, but definitely has an impact on the XRP Ledger community, Sologenic and Corium community, because we're obviously all supporting decentralized applications. So we got to keep our eye on this, and it's nice to see Hester Pierce raising the alarms on this issue. On this Mr. Mann post here, I said, someone please flag as misinformation. Post a story, the U.S. leads way in implementing cryptocurrency regulation. So, yeah, it's hard to imagine that anybody could write that down and be serious. Digital Assets Daily tweeted out an article, Tokenization of real-world assets, a key driver of digital asset adoption, Bank of America. It's a good read. I'm not going to dive into it because this one's going to be fairly long, as is without that, but definitely check that out. I wanted to post this or share this with David Schwartz. This is from Mr. V, Decentralized Exchange. They're the oxygen of DeFi. And we'll just listen to how David Schwartz talks about the current DeFi situation.
I'm going to start by just zooming way out, and just the digital landscape in decentralized finance grew from $670 million to $13 billion in the past year alone. This is a space that is just exploding. And key, right at the center of this massive growth, are decentralized exchanges, DEXs. They're the oxygen of DeFi. DEXs allow users to trade crypto on blockchains amongst themselves. Unlike centralized exchanges like Coinbase or Binance, They have public enforced rules for inherent fairness and openness. In 2021, decentralized exchanges reported more than $1 trillion in trading volume, up from $115 billion the previous year. So it's $115 billion to $1 trillion in 1 year. That's an outstanding growth rate. And the number of active decentralized exchanges has surged dramatically.
So it went from $115 billion on DEXs in 1 year to 1 trillion. So just imagine what lies ahead for this sector. But at the same time, DEXs are definitely going to have a target on their back from the regulators when you're talking about this kind of growth and money flowing into an industry. So an article here on CoinDesk saying the tokenized gold market surpassed 1 billion in volume last month as tokenization of real-world assets gathers pace. Tokenization is a process of putting ownership of tangible assets such as precious metals on the blockchain and offers convenience of buying and selling these assets around the clock because the transactions do not involve traditional brokers. Bank of America sees a tokenization of real-world assets such as commodities, currencies, and equities as a key driver of digital asset adoption. A link off that article, real-world tokenization is surging as TradeFi grows more receptive to blockchain. Blockchain-based tokenization of real-world assets is gaining traction among major financial service firms and other big brands. That makes a number of industry watchers upbeat about the trend in 2023. They say tokenization of real-world assets, a way of putting ownership of tangible assets such as stocks, bonds on the blockchain, offer the convenience of buying and selling these assets around the clock because the transactions do not involve traditional brokers. The concept isn't new, but over the past few months, a number of large banks and other companies have just begun using the process. In November, for instance, U.S. banking giant JP Morgan executed the first live trade using tokenized versions of the yen and the Singapore dollar on the Polygon blockchain. A month later, asset manager WisdomTree unveiled 9 digital funds, adding to one it had started successfully earlier in the year. The funds allow the transfer agent to keep the secondary record of shares on either the Stellar or Ethereum blockchain. You can see this is just the start. There's going to be trillions of dollars moving in to tokenization. So on a lighter note here, Core Apes, we're just now 24 hours away from the biggest auction the XRPL has seen so far. So on April 15th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 noon Pacific, these apes have become one with the validator, giving them unique traits and increased core drip, making them the envy of collectors everywhere. So I got myself an ape, got 2 actually. So yeah, make sure you check out the, and staying with the NFT theme, weekly auction, of course, from Ovi. We'll just let him tell you about it.
How you doing, guys? Ovi, sunny in London. Boy, oh boy, it's nearly the end of the week and there's another auction, powerful auction. If you haven't been to one of my auctions, you're missing out on life. My auctions are powerful. What are they? Powerful. Right, that's not even it. Next Wednesday is my bi-weekly AMA, where I've got a bag of announcements for the community, guys. Right, where should we start? Some crazy updates on X-Walkers, updates on figures, updates on core heroes, crazy updates on figures on our validator, updates on, where are we, the projects we're building with the core council, the Corium punks. Going to be talking about where we're minting, when we're minting, how we are minting. Excited for that, looking forward to that. And crazy announcements and updates on HBAR homies. We're making a slight pivot. We are making some changes, so I'm going to update the community on that. Excited for that. Big changes and updates, so stay tuned. Auction on Saturday and an AMA next Wednesday. Come on, bish, bosh, bash, sap, douchebag. Let's go, squad. Let's go. How you doing?
Yeah, so make sure you check out the auction tomorrow. I sat in last week and checked it out. Great auction. I didn't end up buying anything, but sat through it. Great DJ spinning tunes throughout the whole thing. So yeah, it's really good time, high energy, and everybody's just there to have a good time and appreciate some quality NFTs. A lot of them providing great rewards and utility. So make sure you check it out. And tweet here from Zaki. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the DeFi industry really needs to communicate the massive public benefits that are gained by open source decentralized market infrastructure. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's up to all of us to get the word out so people have a proper understanding what DeFi is all about and the problems that it's supposed to solve. And, just make sure that we're getting the proper narrative out there on what it actually is and does. If we leave it to politicians and people that might not have our best interests in mind to create that narrative and form the regulations around it, it might not turn out so good. And to close up on this one, Swift, this week's LinkedIn live session on CBDCs was our most popular to date. Thanks to everyone that joined. In this edition, Head of Innovation spoke to Alexandra Elisa Thome, Senior Expert Digital Euro at Bunsbank, about her experience working along the 18 commercial and central banks that participated in our groundbreaking CBDC sandbox tests. So there's a lot of value in here. I'm going to close out the last 4 minutes of this video listening to this piece here. I think it's very important. We got to stop the tribalism that's rampant in this industry. Interoperability is key to mass adoption, and we have to work together. We have to quit knocking each other down just because their project's different than ours, or they might be trying to solve the same problem. It's working together that's going to bring the adoption of this technology. So the sooner the communities can all combine their efforts and towards common goal, the quicker we're going to achieve those goals, in my opinion. So this is a very valuable conversation they had. I'm going to break down this video some more again in like I said, the live stream I plan on having here in the next 24 hours. But here's a little taste of this to end the video. So thanks again for all your support. Make sure those notifications are on, your subscribe buttons hit there. And peace and prosperity to all.
Some great questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to pick a few of those, and apologies if we don't get to everyone's, but I'm going to pick out a few. So Lewis, thank you very much for your question about interoperability, and a very interesting question here, Alexandra. Lewis asks, what do you think are the biggest hurdles we need to overcome to ensure interoperability from a legal framework perspective as opposed to a technical perspective? Did you have any thoughts on that?
That's definitely one of the I don't want to call it key problems, but challenges that we're facing. It's kind of like a hen and egg, because a lot of the things that are already put into regulation obviously look at the status quo of things. Right. And now if you're venturing out into like new technology, you really need to revisit a lot of the things that have already been put down on paper. Mm-hmm. But definitely I feel like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be looked at again, just to make sure that the innovation part of what we're trying to really really implement can actually work as intended. Because if you're back in the stuck in the rut of your old the old way of doing things, then you might not really achieve what you're actually out to achieve.
I agree with you, and it's it's a common thing that we also look at from a standards perspective as well. So, for example, the messaging standards that we shepherd and oversee, are those fit for purpose in the future? And so, for instance, in areas like tokenized assets, we've been updating the securities messaging standards, so things like token addresses can be accommodated in those, and that's it's not the most sort of necessarily the sort of the stuff that goes in press headlines, but it's absolutely necessary work to actually make sure that these kind of these can be actually done in practice. So another question's come in from which is an interesting one from Juso. I hope I've got the pronunciation right here. And the question is about the kind of the interaction between CBDCs and instant payments, right? So the question is, CBDCs seem like a great tool for instant payments, but what about current national and regional schemes that have been developed or are under development that are not based on CBDCs? Should those schemes with more traditional money be more aligned with CBDCs, or should they be kept on separate tracks? And I'm sure that's kind of a question that you have constantly on your mind in the Eurosystem perspective, right?
Well, obviously, this should all and everything should enable a coexistence, because we don't really want to marginalize any products or any ways of doing things. Like, we really believe that everything can actually live in harmony. I know it's quite love, peace, harmony, but I think that's definitely the aspirations we should have, because things exist for a reason, and it would just be a shame to really marginalize things. So going back to coexistence. Yeah.
And I think that's that we see the world in that in a very similar way, in that because there is going to be a coexistence, and ultimately it's the consumers, it's the businesses who are the users of these things, who will determine which of these things succeed or don't, and therefore providing them with choice, but they're also providing them with interoperability, so that they can move across those. I think is absolutely
it's
vital.
Also a part, the whole discussion about how are standards developed. Usually it's not the regulator that develops standards, right, or ways of doing things. So
yes,
it would just be a shame to marginalize anything too early in the project, or marginalize it at all. The market needs to be happy.
Right, I fully agree with you. Fully agree with you. I'm going to pick up a question here from Marcus. Thank you for your question, Marcus. Marcus asks, what are some of the risks that were identified during the sandbox exercise, and any thoughts on how to mitigate them going forward?
Well, risks, just because due to the sandbox spirit, obviously the risks are per definition quite controlled already.
Yeah.
I feel like that really enabled us to I don't want to say dive into abstract discussions, but really think about things how they could ideally look.
Yes.
So in this environment, obviously that's when you're able to actually explore these things in this certain way. When you're talking about I suppose creating a production system, things are probably a little bit different, but this is just a step on the way, and this is exactly how I think we should really start things.
Yeah. Agree with you. And as you said, it was very much a controlled environment. And actually, one of the things maybe to share with the folks on the line was that in the sandbox, any of the participants could assume any of the roles. And we thought that was actually quite important, so that people could actually see the end-to-end transaction flow, even if, say, a central bank is never going to actually, in reality, take on a commercial bank role. You can actually see how the transaction flows from different perspectives. And I think that was very valuable. Obviously, as we go forward now into the next stage of a kind of beta version of this solution, we also need to be very carefully considering the risks of that, and we are doing so. But it's going to be very much a staged approach here, and just as many central banks are taking very much a staged approach to CBDC development as well. So we try and move forward in parallel together. One final question, if I may, Alexandra. I know we've run out of time, but there's so many questions that have come in. I want to make sure that they get covered. So Kenichi asks, considering the G20's enhanced cross-border payments target and the FSB CPMI roadmap, Is it possible for CBDCs to start to contribute to some of the achievements of the targets they have with the along the time frame of sort of 2027 that they've set out?
Obviously, like it's definitely one of the tools that we've got in the box to really tackle this problem. But one thing that you can't interoperability between CBDCs is obviously something you can't add on at the end. So this is one of the things that you really ought to consider from the very beginning, because anyone that's worked in IT projects, integration is always the tough part. So, if you just consider it early enough, I think it can be a very valuable tool in doing so. But it really depends on everyone, and obviously BIS, for those that might be aware of their models, there's different ways to go about, and then again highlighting the need to really collaborate together, remain in constant exchange, just to avoid any ugly problems from appearing down the line.
I think that's very well said, and as you know, we've been kind of real advocates that interoperability should be designed in from an early stage rather than thought about afterwards, because we don't want to have disconnected digital islands here. We want to have instant and frictionless payments, and that to be really smooth, whether it's with a CBDC or whether it's with some other form of digital currency, or whether it's a traditional form of currency. Ultimately, I strongly believe that the consumers and businesses that we all serve together, in some ways, they don't actually care. The payment is actually about achieving something else that they were looking to achieve in their business or their lives. And so it's the responsibility on us to make that whole process run smoothly and securely in the background for them. Any final thoughts, Alexandra, before we close this session?
I thought this was a great session. Thank you for having me. Again, highlighting the importance of collaboration. So I'm looking forward to our joint work.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for joining today and joining